Oh, watch this. Watch this. I am showing you this video for no other reason than to prove Joe Biden is not there. The guy is gone. Watch this. So he gives a Medal of Honor to Captain Larry Taylor, and then he just walks away. He leaves the stage. Look at the photographers. Look at him. Look at him. Nobody knows what's going on, including Joe Biden. Gabe made a good point. This recipient, this Medal of Honor recipient, is older than Joe Biden. He's older than Joe Biden. He knows what time it is. The President of the United States, the Commander-in-Chief, doesn't. The Medal of Honor recipient is older. Everybody in that room knows what's going on. No one had the courage to say, Mr. President, turn around, get back on that stage. Get back on that stage. What we're watching is a sitcom. I want to offer you Hollywood producers or writers, when you get off a strike, I want to offer you guys a manuscript for a sitcom called Biden, because that is what we're watching portrayed right in front of our eyes. And it would simply be the man that is the most powerful man in the whole entire world who has dementia. He isn't there. So his staff is actually running the White House for him, and all of the media and all of his party, they're all playing along with it. That's the sitcom. That's the comedy skit. Any takers? Unbelievable. All right. Welcome to this edition of the Carl J. I did that. I wanted you to see that video for no other reason than to prove Joe Biden isn't there. I was on Officer Tatum's show last night. Guys, what's happening with China? They have infiltrated everything. Spy balloons. They've opened police stations in New York City. They bought some of our land here inside of the United States. They have these Confucius Society type things that are sprung up on college campuses. You had the two Navy sailors that were plotting and selling secret information to China. And now we found out that we have about 100 spies that have infiltrated the DOD. They've been basically foreign nationals that have been pressured into becoming spies for China. And that is our president. That is our commander-in-chief. I had a guy by the name of Jeremiah call in last night to the Officer Tatum show, and he said he had this feeling that something big would happen to kind of wake up the people. But I think he was thinking in a positive light. I'm scared that it could be an attack on America. I pray to God that isn't the case. But you saw the sitcom called Biden. Oh, my Lord. Anyway, all right, guys, welcome to this edition of the Carl Jackson Show podcast. This is your daily dose of objective truth in a world of confusion and lies. We are going to be getting to Fani Willis's daddy. I want to talk about her daddy or her dad or who her dad is. I think that's very important. I think it plays out on what we see happening. Also, Kurt Schlichter from townhall.com, also an author and a trial attorney, certified trial attorney in Los Angeles, has written a fantastic column of what has to happen and how we flip the tables on the left. And he writes this, I don't want to say begrudgingly, perhaps that's not the wrong word, but he cautions while he's writing that this shouldn't be done, but it must be done. And that's how we flip the law, or the arbitrary law, on the left. So I'm going to get into that on this edition of the Carl Jackson Show podcast. Also, Enrique Tarrio has been sentenced to decades, 22 years behind bars. He is one of the founding members, or the Proud Boys chairman, has been sentenced to 22 years. He's Cuban. He looks black. When you look at his picture, he looks black, but he is a Cuban, or he's American of Cuban descent. Sentenced to 22 years. He wasn't even at the J6 Capitol riot, nor did anyone, from what I could tell, do anything that was so crazy as to get at the Capitol to get the sentences that are being handed down using this seditious conspiracy charge, which comes from the Civil War area. So we will talk about that. But again, I wanted you to see that video. Please subscribe to the podcast wherever you go to get our podcast. Review. When you review us, give us a 5, por favor, or the highest rating possible. That'll help us to move up the charts. That'll help more people to see us. Also, you guys, if you're listen, mypillow.com, is a sponsor of this program. We need their support. We need your support, frankly. And so please support mypillow.com. Please support Mike Lindell. American jobs, American manufacturing, and great products that you can sleep well on, great products that you can enjoy. All of his products, Mike's products, come with a 10-year warranty and a 60-day money-back guarantee. Right now, if you go to mypillow.com, if you click on the radio podcast square, it's at the top of the page. Enter my name, Carl, por favor. All right. Enter my name, Carl, and you will get a 50% discount off of Giza sheets and deep discounts on all products on mypillow.com. Literally, they're offering deep discounts. All you have to do is use my name, mypillow.com, or give them a call, 800-858-0263. All right. Now, I'm trying to figure out what sequence I should do, this in. So I have here Enrique Tarrio sentenced to decades behind bars. Turnabout is fair play and also both fun and essential. Actually, let me do this in what I think should be chronological order. All right. So the latest is the Proud Boys chairman, Enrique Tarrio, as I mentioned earlier, was sentenced to 22 years behind bars. He was not even in Washington, D.C. At the time of the Capitol riots. He wasn't even there. The sentence marks the longest to date, hat tip Daily Wire, in the DOJ's handling of J6. The Trump appointed judge. And the reason why I say this, I hate using that term or you hate using those words, Trump appointed, Biden appointed, but because judges should be neutral. But these words are starting, it seems to me, to matter far too much on either side, mostly on the left. But I'm particularly concerned about this Judge Timothy Kelly. He is a Trump appointee, and that's not an indictment on Trump. So please don't take it that way. I just think a lot of these guys get caught up in the swamp. They get caught up in the system, and they don't have the courage that we thought they might have, especially given the times that we live in today, which is a post-constitutional America. So Timothy Kelly handed down this judgment. So Tarrio was found guilty of seditious conspiracy, again, by a federal jury in D.C. This happened back in May, and then he was sentenced by Timothy Kelly. He was looking at 33 years behind bars. He was given 22 years. Here's what Tarrio had to say. Here's a direct quote from Enrique Tarrio. He says, "I am not a political zealot. Inflicting harm or changing the results of the election was not my goal," close quote. He says, "Please show me mercy. I ask that you not take my 40s away from me," he says, close quote. Just heart-wrenching. Now, we know that there has been evidence to suggest that there were Capitol police officers that were staged outside of the Capitol. I forget the name of that one guy that came out that was, I forget the guy that was inciting people that kind of disappeared. And now he's out trying to sue people and threaten people and all that kind of stuff. And he was inciting people to go inside of the Capitol itself. It's totally insane. But this guy gets 22 years behind bars. You guys remember the BLM and Antifa rioters that stormed the Capitol, that literally burned down, thank God, not to the ground. They were able to stop it. But that historic church right across from the White House, they were literally trying to barnstorm the White House, where Trump had to go underground for safety. Nothing. I haven't heard one of those cases. But this guy gets 22 years. Tarrio was notably not in D.C. on the Capitol breach. Prosecutors instead argued that Tarrio was a leader and not a foot soldier, calling him, quote, intelligent, charming, creative, and articulate. You know why the prosecutor would use those terms? I mean, obviously, he is a very smart and intelligent guy, but they use it as a pejorative in this sense. He can manipulate people. That's why they would use that argument. They claim that he used those talents to, quote, inflame and radicalize an untold number of followers, close quote, as if people can't think for themselves. Man, they relied heavily on private communication. The prosecution did, from J6 defendants, sorting through hundreds of thousands of messages to try to make the case that Tarrio and others were guilty of this rare seditious conspiracy charge. How do we not know that they sifted through, as they claim, hundreds of thousands of messages and just pieced stuff together? We don't know. We don't know. These guys are not going to get a fair trial in Washington, D.C. These guys should be pardoned if Trump is elected, if Donald Trump, if Ron DeSantis or any Republican is elected. These people should be pardoned and walk. I only have confidence that if Trump, DeSantis, or Larry Elder, and I know he's not on the stage yet, these are the only people that seem to have spoken about this, Vivek Ramaswamy. But I don't believe that I'm not sure that I even believe Vivek Ramaswamy at this point. To be frank with you, I think the guy knows all of the right things to say, unfortunately. But you know, who knows? Maybe he's evolving in his conservatism. That is yet to be seen, but he's certainly falling in the polls. I think as more people start realizing, he said a lot of different things several months ago, or a few months ago, even in some cases, and all the way back to a year ago. He's saying a lot of different things now than he said back when. But anyway, getting back to this. So again, this guy sentenced to 22 years. 22 years. And one message used by the prosecution, Tario said, quote, "Make no mistake, we did this." We did what? We did what? See, this is very dangerous. I don't think you can get a fair defense in Washington, D.C. And frankly, I think one of the best ideas that I've heard offered so far was actually offered by Governor DeSantis. Maybe Trump has done the same thing. Trump has said, listen, full pardon, which I love, but I also think there's got to be a plan afterwards. That anybody that goes to Washington, D.C., if they're visiting, if they're not a resident of Washington, D.C., they need to be tried outside of Washington, D.C. They need to be tried in front of a jury of their peers in their own on their own states, in their own counties, in their own district. They should not ever have to face a jury in Washington, D.C. Why? Because Washington, D.C. votes, 95% Democrat or some insane number like that. Anyone living outside of Washington, D.C., particularly anyone that's Republican, Christian, conservative, will never get a fair jury. Never. It's impossible to get a fair jury in Washington, D.C. I don't even think you'll get a fair judge trial where you just sit in front of a judge in Washington, D.C. The government also highlighted a document outlining a Capitol takeover that was sent to Tario on social media platform Telegram called 1776 Returns. Tario did not directly respond to the sent document and claims he never even saw it. So they used this document in the prosecution that he never opened and he never saw. Defense lawyers maintained throughout the trial that there was not a single shred of written evidence to show that Tario conspired to stop the certification of 2020. None. But he got 22 years. Here's another quote from Tario. This is while he was held up in a jail cell. He said, what they're trying to do, what people are trying to do, and this is in general, he says, I'm speaking in general, is manipulate how we talk to each other in the locker room. Tario said in a Twitter Spaces event hosted on April 25th, quote, and it's not fair. It's just not right. It's not the justice system that you grew up in civics class learning about. And then you have two other Proud Boy members, Joe Biggs and Ethan Ordine, have also been convicted of seditious conspiracy. Judge Kelly sentenced Big to 17 years behind bars, and Ordine was hit with 18 years. Another Proud Boy, Zachary Real, was also convicted of seditious conspiracy. He was given 15 years in prison by Judge Kelly. Moreover, two Oath Keepers who have been convicted of seditious conspiracy. You have Stuart Rose, sentenced to 18 years. Kelly Meggs, sentenced to 12 years. Nothing for BLM or Antifa. Moving on. Now, I'm building the case for what Kurt Schlichter talks about, and it is time. It is time to turn the tables on the left. We have no choice. It's not what I want to do. It's not what Kurt Schlichter wants to do. I don't think it's what any of you want to do, but we have no choice but to fight fire with fire. So let me give you a little bit of background. I forgot to print this out. So I'm just bear with me. I'm going to go through this. I have a little bit of it on Word, but you should know who Fani Willis's dad is. And I'm sure to Fani Willis, he is a great man. And for all intents and purposes, he probably is a great citizen. He's obviously a great dad to his daughter, Fani Willis. but he has a belief system that he adapted. I'm not sure if he still holds true to this, but I'm assuming that he has. It's definitely influenced him in his younger years. I wouldn't doubt that it still does today, and I believe that it influences Fani Willis today, even though she would say otherwise. Hat tip New York Post: Trump prosecutor Fani Willis, Fani Willis's dad was top Black Panther who called cops the enemy. The father of Georgia District Attorney prosecuting Donald Trump was a prominent Black Panther who called police the enemy, according to new records that were revealed. John C. Floyd III is his name. His daughter is Fani Willis. Again, she's the Fulton County, Georgia District Attorney. She told academic researchers that he considered police in his native Los Angeles in the 1960s to be an occupying army, and that they were nothing but trouble, close quote. Now, I like putting history in context. I disagree with the Black Panthers. I will say this. I understand during a civil rights era where some blacks would get hot and bothered and some would want to resort to violence. However, it was not productive. You had another movement. You had Martin Luther King Jr.'s movement, peaceful nonviolence that was more productive, that didn't cause on disunity and hatred or call for disunity and hatred, but rather unity and love. And it was more potent. It was more powerful. I know Martin Luther King had some political leanings. I mean, some say he was Republican. I believe that he was Republican. His father certainly was. But it did seem like he flirted with communism towards the later years of his life. Anyway, having said that, going back to Fani Willis and her dad, John C. Floyd III. Floyd is now 80. He's also called a prominent white politician of the era, a Texas cracker, which I'll get into shortly. He suggested that he believed the conspiracy theories that Malcolm X was assassinated by the CIA. Floyd is now. Listen, I hate to say this. I don't believe anything out of the CIA or FBI's mouth. And I believe all of these conspiracy theories. I disregarded everything. I don't anymore. I hate to say that, but that's where I am now. Floyd is extremely close to his daughter, Willis. They speak up to 10 times a day. Of course, she has indicted 18 of people, including the former president. Actually, not including, but 18 others, including the former president's personal attorney, Rudy Giuliani. Our Salem colleague Jenna Ellis is amongst the 18 as well, alleging that they plotted to overturn the 2020 election results in Georgia. Again, I don't know how a district attorney is able to bring about federal charges, but she is doing it. The media is letting her get away with it. Willis told the Post that she speaks to her father as much as 10 times a day, and that his values continue to guide her. But she didn't say whether or not he still believes in those Black Panther values. Here's a quote from Fani Willis. I have an absolutely amazing father, and I'm very privileged to have been raised by such a great man. My father taught me that every single person is entitled to dignity and respect, no matter who they are, no matter their race, religion, or socioeconomic status. I'm not sure if I believe that. Actually, I don't believe that, knowing his background, unless there was a point in time that Fani Willis or her dad, John Floyd III, could point to where he changed his ways, where he repented. Until now, little has been known about Floyd beyond brief details, but it can now be revealed, had tipped the New York Post, by the way, that he was a high-ranking member of the Black Panthers in Los Angeles. So he wasn't just your ordinary Black Panther. Floyd was a founding member in 1967 and at one point a chairman of the Black Panther political party. And that is a faction of the Black Panthers that was a little more moderate, according to the Post and the others. Floyd became a defense attorney after splitting from the Panthers. This was in the early 1970s. But again, we don't know where his worldview lies today. But before then, he told an interview for California State University's Tom and Ethel Bradley Center he was so high in the Black Panthers that he became friends with Martin Luther King Jr. Speaking to the Bradley Center for its quote-unquote Black Panther Archives series, Floyd said that growing up in L.A. or Inglewood, Los Angeles, I'm not sure if I don't think I have family there now. I did have family there. Yeah, actually I do. He and other African Americans never went to the police despite the area being riddled with crime. He said, quote, I grew up here and I have remarked to myself as many car break-ins, house break-ins, assaults. I never the whole time. I grew up in Los Angeles ever remember anyone calling the police department because we considered LAPD to be the enemy. We thought they were nothing, and I'm quoting, nothing but trouble. They weren't there to help us. I must have been 20 years old before I saw "to protect and serve," which is the motto for the Los Angeles PD, written on the side of their vehicles, and wondered in my own mind, quote, is that what police are supposed to do? Because we saw them as an occupying army. That's what he goes on to say. This is a man that speaks to his daughter 10 times a day. Floyd helped to fund the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee in Los Angeles as its sit-ins against segregated lunch counters in Jim Crow South spread and the Jim Crow South spread. I think that's a good thing. But by the mid-1960s, there were tensions between black groups in L.A., and the prominent California Democratic politician Jesse M. Unruh, at the time the Speaker of the State Assembly, intervened to mediate. Floyd said Unruh, nicknamed Big Daddy, was a fat Texas cracker. he said, I was so PO'd. I'm sorry, I shouldn't be laughing at that, but something about that threw me off. A fat Texas cracker. Wow. Okay. I was so PO'd. How could this Texas cracker, and I'm quoting him, come here and run the black community? I was just livid. He says. He told the Sacramento Bee, in 1967, the LA Times reported that Floyd, then a 24-year-old teacher, helped found the Black Panther political party at a meeting, saying Malcolm X is going to be our patron saint. Our political philosophy is black nationalism. Black nationalism. Black nationalism. He told the Sacramento Bee that he was, quote, sick of the Democratic Party, and listed the BPPP's aims as including political power for the black community. All right, so the Black Panther political party. So that's who he was. Did he get rid of those views? I don't know. In 1973 was when he was an aide to the campaign by Sam Bradley to be Los Angeles' first black mayor. He was accused of being part of violence and denied it, saying he was to the right out of much of the Black Power movement. In their interviews, Floyd said he had met two prophets in his life, Malcolm X, murdered in 1965, and King, assassinated in 1968. How the LA Times reported Floyd founding the Black Panther Party. It listed its aims as getting African Americans to vote. Floyd also told the Sacramento Bee he was fed up with the Democrat Party of Los Angeles. All right, so this was a guy that was more part of the moderate branch, I guess, of the Black Panther Party, but also but definitely a Black Panther. Floyd was also a close acquaintance of Huey P. Newton, the leader of the Black Panther Party, which was more militant then, but allied with Floyd's Black Panther Party. Floyd met with Malcolm X for the first time when he was just 15 and was amazed while watching him on TV interviews. Floyd said, quote, I don't want somebody to think I was a kook or something about that, but I wonder about all of these conspiracy theories. If you know anything about quote unquote, longtime FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover, he talked about how he did not want the rise of a black messiah. All right. I know that, quote, I'm quoting him again. I know that the CIA was extremely concerned about Malcolm having been in Africa and having done the Hajj. I wonder about Malcolm's assassination, how somebody could kill Malcolm, and it would seem like it was a setup, and the escape car was the same car that Malcolm had driven to the Audubon ballroom, close quote. Adding fuel to Floyd's suspicion was that several black groups were set to unify behind Malcolm X, including Newton's party, right before he was killed. Describing the last time he saw King, Floyd said the civil rights icon told him the uncommitted life is not worth living. So Willis was born in 1971 in Inglewood. And when she was in the first grade, she moved to Washington with her father, who became a criminal defense attorney and is said to have become disillusioned with the Black Panther movement. But why? Why? Willis has claimed she was raised by a single dad, and it is unclear what happened to her mother because Floyd he remarried in 1989, but his second wife died in 2012 due to complications from a brain tumor. In an interview with the South Atlanta magazine, Willis described how when she was 9, her father would take her to court with him on Saturdays when he was working. She wrote that after that, her, quote, destiny was set, and she wanted to follow in his footsteps. But I want to know if following in his footsteps means being a racist, being a black nationalist. We need to know that. That's important. I understand a young girl looking up to her dad, but we need to know if he's still a bigot. We need to know that. All right, I'm going to bring this to a close. That was very important. Now, let me just end it here. Kurt Schlichter wrote a fabulous column. Let me just give you the summary, and it's called Turnabout is Fair Play and also both fun and essential. When life gives you lemons, make litigation, he says. All these bogus criminal cases against not only Donald Trump, but against anybody who knows Trump or has spoken the name of Donald Trump or was even or the same continent as Donald Trump are illegal abortion that would make Planned Parenthood blush, he writes. He's a comedian too, or he was a comedian. Yet, despite these charges have nothing to do with actual law, nothing to do with actual law, they have everything to do with creating an opportunity, as he sees it, and it's an opportunity to use our power as a suppository against our ruthless enemies. Now, I want to be clear. Because he was very clear. Kurt Schlichter of townhall.com, he says, no, I am not for any of this. I think this is a bad idea. I warn people against creating these new rules where you use the law or instead you twist the law like some sort of Tibetan yogi into unrecognizable forms and shapes in order to trap your political enemies. I am on record, he says, saying it's a bad idea, and he still thinks it's a bad idea. He writes, but what I think doesn't matter. The new rules are now the rules, and it's time to use them like he says, like Eric Swalwell used Fang Fang. So let me give you a couple of examples because he talks about the Trump Mar-a-Lago case and how he is a prestigious certified trial attorney in Los Angeles. All right. And so he talks about how the charges in Mar-a-Lago, and he goes into detail, have no legal merit whatsoever. He talks about how the new rules were established by the left, and they brought about, how it's now okay to manufacture charges against political opponents. Or he says about how it's now okay to manufacture charges against political opponents does provide us with an opportunity to jam up a bunch of Democrats, and jam them we must, he says. He says basically you can't have one set of rules, and we all know this, for one group of people and another set for another. If you really like the old rules, you're not going to get them back, he says, by empowering your enemy to violate the norms while like a little submissive, you obediently continue to pretend that it is still 2005 and we're just not there. He says the great George M.F. Washington, who you should read all the time, explains that there are risks to telling yourself that the enemy is so bad. Listen to this. This is very important. There's a risk. He's telling us to be cautious as we go forward, but go forward we must. He explains that there are risks to telling yourself that the enemy is so bad that you have to take radical steps in response and abandon the norms that make you a civilized society. And he says, yes, you can go too far, but you can also not go far enough. And he says, I understand the risk of not retaliating here are much worse than the risk of going too far. In other words, it is time to fight fire with fire when it comes to the left. He gives examples of COVID, and he gives examples of social media, the crackdown on social media and free speech. All right. So he says a lot of these novel Democrats changes, and it's a really bad idea to create novel criminal charges. Again, he stresses when you're prosecuting political opponents, but they depend on statutes that were used to, ironically, listen to this, keep Democrats from letting black people vote. These are a lot of the statutes that the left are using today to go after conservatives. A lot of them are phrases making illegal any attempt to prevent someone from exercising his rights. And he says that's pretty vague, which is pretty useful when you want to abuse the statutes. And again, this is a terrible idea. But he says a state like Missouri probably has some of these laws. What it needs to do is start indicting people in Washington, D.C. for violating them. In other words, charge people in Washington, D.C. with Missouri state laws. If they're saying that Trump cannot be pardoned, which I don't even know to be true, frankly, doesn't make sense to me. But if they're saying Trump cannot be pardoned from state laws, even though he was the president on the federal level, then we need to start indicting some of the left on state laws, even the ones that are in Washington, D.C. The fascist Faucis of the world that told us to wear a mask, that jabs would do this and that. Now that the evidence is coming out that we know that they lied, prosecute fascist Fauci in the state of Missouri for affecting people in the state of Missouri. Likewise, you do the same with social media and free speech. They've weaponized free speech. Let's criminalize them censoring our free speech on social media. And so you get the Zucker, although he didn't use the Zuckerberg's name, but you get the people that silenced us, whether you're in Oklahoma or you're Missouri, you charge them on state charges, even if they're in Washington, D.C. And then you know what they'll do? They'll say, hold on. They'll cry uncle. They'll cry uncle. And what they'll do is say, wait a minute, you're a state. These are federal charges, or we're a federal, we worked for the federal government. You can't charge us on state charges. Exactly. So now we fought the fight that the left is fighting. That's exactly what they're doing to the former president and 18 other of his, what they consider co-conspirators. We got to fight fire with fire. Excellent column, Kurt Schlichter. I'm going to put that out on my Twitter and other social media spaces. So please be sure to check it out. All right. So today we've covered the unjustness of Enrique Tarrio being sentenced to 22 years behind bars for being a part of the Proud Boys, which, by the way, was not a terrorist organization. They were literally going in the streets protecting people from the terrorist organizations Antifa and Black Lives Matter. Or just showing up so that people would not be bullied by those groups. They would show up at some events. And for that, for protecting American citizens and not starting riots and not allowing violence to take place against innocent Americans, they're going to spend some serious time in prison unless there's a pardon or unless somebody comes in with the idea, I think like with Ron DeSantis' idea. And again, I don't know if Trump has adopted this. Maybe he has. I need to go back and look at this. Trump said he would pardon him, and that's great. I think Ron DeSantis needs to do the same thing. I think I think everybody needs to pledge to this. It's likely that Trump will be the nominee, but I think every Republican should pledge to pardon these people that are that have been unfairly prosecuted. I really do. And go back to that idea. I really love that idea. No one that doesn't live in Washington, D.C. should be prosecuted in Washington, D.C. unless they commit like a physical crime, violent crime of some sort in Washington, D.C. against a resident of D.C. If they commit a crime against a person, an actual resident in Washington, D.C., then so be it. But these federal crimes, nah. Go back to your own state, district, county, so on, et cetera, to really sit in front of a jury of your peers. All right, guys, I appreciate you tuning in to this edition of the Carl Jackson Show podcast. Please follow me, all things social media at the Carl Jackson Show. I certainly appreciate that. Subscribe to the podcast, por favor. Until next time, don't grow weary doing good. God bless.